Hi, everyone. I'm so excited and honored to have been asked to share a talk with you all today for PyCon Nigeria. And while we can't be together in person due to the unprecedented pandemic, as well as just broader health challenges that we are facing this year, it's so nice to know that we're still finding ways to build meaningful community and connections during this year. And actually very in touch with that theme, the name of my talk is what I talk about when I talk about Python: diversity, inclusion, and community with the Python Software Foundation. For anyone who may be interested, you can follow the slides with this link here, bit.ly/PyCon Nigeria Mesa, and you can check out the slides if there's anything you would like to be able to view on your own again after this talk. But first, a little bit about who I am, which is a very good question. My name is Lorena Mesa, and I do a lot of things in the Python community. For example, I'm an organizer with PyLady Chicago. I'm the president, or as we say, the chairperson of the Python Software Foundation. I use Python in my day-to-day job at GitHub, and I also use Python as an example often when I'm talking about a topic very near and dear to my heart: ethics and technology. And there's quite a few other ways that I talk about and use Python in my own projects and in other things that I'm exploring. If you are ever wanting to have a conversation or follow up after this, you can reach out to me on social media. My Twitter handle is @Lorena Nicole, and yes, that is 4 O's in a row, and that is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I am very responsive on social media and do love hearing about what you all may be using Python for, or how Python and the community impact you and the work that you're doing. So when I sat down to write this talk, I wasn't actually sure what to say. It's always pretty scary to write a new talk, or even to do any kind of public speaking in general. Add in that you have some of that anxiety that you feel, where often this is something we call feeling like an imposter or imposter syndrome. And unfortunately, this is something that I've felt numerous times, even now having worked in technology for a few years. So when I started thinking about, why was I feeling this anxiety, I tried to change that question into something that I know that I could answer, which was, what is my personal relationship with Python? How has Python been a part of my life? And why am I so dedicated to volunteering in the Python community? And in answering that question, something that I find when I talk to people about my journey as a Pythonista and how I use Python is often about many different types of experiences I've had in my life. But often when I start talking about Python, what I talk about when it comes to Python has been my own introduction to Python as a Chicago resident. So I am from Chicago, the Windy City. Here is a picture of our skyline, which is pretty gorgeous, and we have this great view of one of the Great Lakes, this one specifically being Lake Michigan. Chicago, the home of the first skyscraper with the home insurance building built in 1884. Also another first for Chicago, the first Ferris wheel, and also the creators of deep dish pizza, which I'm here to tell you that we don't actually really eat in Chicago. I think that's very much a thing that maybe tourists do, but I don't call it deep dish pizza really pizza. It's too much. It's too much. But the reason I highlight why I talk about Chicago in relation to my Python journey has to do directly with how I got introduced to Python. See, as a lifelong Chicagoan living in the United States of America, like many people that are residents in the United States of America, as well as many other countries around the world, Our communities are all made up from the various identities and paths that our family members and our fellow neighbors have taken before us. See, I have family roots in Mexico, in España, and Cuba. So family coming from Spain, Cuba, and Mexico. And it was actually Chicago that became the area where all of this family came together, and my story then enters the picture. Specifically in 2009, I graduated from university with a degree in mathematics and political science from Northwestern University, a university that sits just north of Chicago in a suburb called Evanston. And around this time that I graduated, unfortunately, there was an economic crisis that was happening. Many folks tell the story of the impact that Wall Street had on the mortgage crisis for folks that had homes, and their homes being underwater since they essentially were losing so much value on their mortgages due to this crisis that was happening. Something else, though, that happened as a person graduating from university, there wasn't exactly very good job opportunity, or it was a very precarious market. And the reason I call that out is there was a big movement in the air at this time. There was all of this feeling that people were hungry for something different. They were hungry for something new. And this movement could be characterized best as change we can believe in. So the 2008 Obama campaign is quite groundbreaking in its use of technology for running a modern political campaign in the United States. Were it not for the internet, Barack Obama would not be the president. Were it not for the internet, Barack Obama would not have been the nominee. Arianna Huffington, editor of the Huffington Post, famously described the Obama campaign and its reliance on technology. The ways that we saw so much of this work using technology in novel ways can be seen in a few of the strategies that were used in the campaign, such as the heavy investment in social media, such as doing town halls on YouTube. Very interesting to think that today, social media is such a standard tool that's used in political campaigns, when only just over a decade ago, that was not the case. Also, we saw that Get Out the Vote, which GOTV stands for, a lot of these outreach strategies were now being informed by this emerging discipline called data science. And last but not least, there was all of this customized fill in the blank for Obama interest groups, such as Latinos for Obama. Now, the reason I call this out, and particularly the role of technology in the presidential campaign, is at the time that I actually graduated from university, I already had been working as a staffer in the Chicago headquarters in 2008. The campaign, beyond just that we were using technology in novel ways, we were also introducing non-traditional data sources into how we were building meaning and building out how it was that we can build profiles of individual voters that we wanted to reach. So pulling data from social media and using that data to help us build models to target and interact with our key demographic audiences in new personalized fashions. This was something that was not done before this campaign. And when you think about what kind of skills were necessary to do this kind of outreach work, to do this kind of customized targeting of voters and development of different voter profiles, predictive analytics, for example, answering questions that, like, given X turnout of so many registered voters in an area, how likely were we to win? How many more people would we need to register in order to reach that threshold where we could say we had confidence in winning? Another example of the kind of work that we did, sentiment analysis. That is, understanding, was our messaging on brand? And you can think about that also in relation to the social media strategy of how we were trying to interact with our audience. Also, mapping challenges. Where could we best allocate our assets on the ground to meet our key voting requirements in each state? All of these types of problems, which can be solved by data science, drew from so many different areas of expertise, not only including subject area expertise, but also math and programming. Yet, as the sole intern turned staffer that was based in headquarters for the Latino vote team for Obama for America. I alone was not suited or did not know how to take on all of this work. I had some of the background and had part of it with my stats background and someone who's trained as a political scientist. But where I found that I was lacking was in my technical skills to help me do the work I needed to do. And this is where Python first came into my life. Founded in 2003, the Chicago Python User Group, or what we affectionately call Chippy. If you see here, like the chipmunk is our logo. It's very cute. But founded in 2003, the Chicago Python User Group is one of the most active user groups in the world, with more than 3,000 members and many famous alumni like David Beasley or Naomi Cedar. The Chicago Python User Group is a must-stop for any Pythonista visiting Chicago. Therefore, it was a logical resource for me to turn to in 2009 when I was struggling to figure out how I could keep up with the required work I needed to do for the campaign. Specifically, that's where I found community to help me start learning about the technical know-how of needing to do some of this work, specifically in a programming language, to help me move at a quicker rate and help me deliver the work that I needed to do. So when I talk about Python, I'm often talking about not only my journey of how I got started with Python, specifically through my former life as a political scientist, but I specifically talk about the user community. I also talk about how Python has increasingly been a tool used to fight for social justice. This is on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see an image, a graphic of Chicago, my home city. And looking at the Chicago landscape, this story is the story of so many cities around not only the United States of America, but around the world. And it's the story that we've seen decade after decade. The last 40 years, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, the middle class, it either completely gets erased or is relocating to the suburbs. And additionally, with these trends of capital getting concentrated amongst specific peoples, or capital just moving outside the city of the city base, what we also see in looking at this landscape of Chicago is also increased racial segregation, where on the north side of Chicago is the more affluent white population of Chicago, whereas the southwest and south sides of Chicago are where people that are people of color, such as the Latinos living on the southeast side and the Black community living on the south side, are being pushed further and further to. Unfortunately, as well, not only is it that we see this separation that's increasingly along racial lines and increasingly is defined by those who have access to capital and those who don't, but in areas where Chicago has a larger percentage of community of color, these also tend to be the areas that are the most heavily policed. Policing has always been a very, very big hot button issue in my country, especially in Chicago. With work I did in 2017 and 2018 for the Chicago Justice Project, I helped conduct investigations into the disappearances of approximately 7,000 people, that largely folks of color who during their time in police captivity were not documented on the books of where they were being held, how long they were being detained, et cetera, et cetera. This disappearance of folks when in police custody added to the frustration and the inability of their loved ones to try to find them as they were trying to help them meet parole or help them get the resources they needed in challenging whatever legal fight that they needed to raise in relation to why the police had them in custody. So given this systemic demonstrated pattern of holding folks, largely folks of color, and not granting them their basic, most fundamental rights, such as access to lawyers, or denying them a phone call, which should be guaranteed to help them, contact loved ones or a lawyer. It was actually through this work with the Chicago Justice Project, where I was using Python for data analysis and data munging, et cetera, that helped us as a collective shed more light on the topic of systemic racism in Chicago policing practices. So again, Python was a tool that was instrumental in helping us continue to have a battle against oppression. Python increasingly, again, was a tool that we could use to help us in seeking accountability from public actors that weren't holding up their end of the bargain. So during my career, I've seen how technology has direct social impact, how we can make the world better or how it can divide us. However, in the Python community, I also find that many of us in our community ask these types of questions of ourselves as well. How can we as individual technologists do better? How can we as Pythonistas build better, responsible technology? Or to sum it up in a different way, what do we want our impact on the world to be? So what do I talk about when I talk about Python? I talk about how I got introduced to Python through the work of political campaigns. I talk about how the user community helped me in that journey. And I talk about how Python has had this really powerful connection to helping challenge and mount investigations into issues of systemic racism, how Python has been instrumental in helping think about social justice, not only just from the perspective of technology, but also larger practices like policing. So not only is that all part of the story that I talk about when I talk about Python, but more specifically, I talk about, I think, the most important thing, which is the community. In 2017, Stack Overflow reported that Python was the most visited topic. And why is that? Well, there's many reasons, including its ease of use, the fact that Python is open source, or that it has many use cases, such as in education or in science or in web development. In addition to the flexibility of Python, though, we've also seen that Python has rapidly grown in its use around the world. In a report from Octoverse, which is an annual report that GitHub publishes, which was most recently just published this past December, GitHub observed that Python is the second most used language on the GitHub platform. So when we talk about how Python is this global language, we can also very much see that in looking at the distribution of Python grants that are going to help events worldwide, like conferences, developer sprints, and other such efforts. In 2019 alone, more than a quarter of the funds that went to our events around the world included approximately 26% to Africa, followed closely by North America and Europe, with then some 15% going to events in Latin America. Speaking in terms of real dollars, then, the amount spent in 2018 amounted to $324,000 US dollars, supporting events in 51 countries through the Python Software Foundation Grants Program, which, by the way, is a 22.6% increase from the amount of dollars awarded in 2017. In total, the Python Software Foundation has dispersed approximately $1.7 million in financial support through its scholarships for trainings, conferences, sprints, and development around the world between just the years of 2014 and 2019. So while the Python Software Foundation, as we can see from the global events that we help fund, beyond the fact that Python is also just a global community, there's this group called the Python Software Foundation that sometimes some Pythonistas may not know about. So what is the Python Software Foundation. And what do we do? As you can see here is the mission statement of the Python Software Foundation. And so yes, while we do give money to help fund events around the world in the Python community, there's so much more that is part of the Python Software Foundation mandate. The mission of the PSF is not only to promote and protect and advance the language, but also to support the community. In fact, I'd say that the most important part of the mission is the growth of a diverse and international community of Python programmers. However, in order to protect the community, the Python Software Foundation first has to protect Python's legal trademark. So the Python Software Foundation is actually a nonprofit legal entity that owns and protects the intellectual property rights behind Python. This also, and most importantly, allows us to keep Python free to use. Established in 2001, the Python Software Foundation is registered in the United States and again owns the trademark. So by protecting the brand, by protecting the Python brand, something that the Python Software Foundation is able to do is we are able to actually organize PyCon USA, specifically by us owning and managing the brand of what a PyCon experience is, which is a very, very valuable thing, since for organizations to be able to run their own PyCon, they need to have a code of conduct, as well as have other items that indicates they're in good standing with the Python Software Foundation. All of these requirements and having a group that actually oversees the legal strategy as well as the trademark means that we can build up our own brand, that brand then being something that reflects what our core values are. And our core values, as seen with the mission statement, are very much focused on not only maintaining the language, but also on investing and taking care of our community. One giant way we do this is by running PyCon USA. So while there's other PyCons around the world, such as PyCon Nigeria, the Python Software Foundation does not run all of those. The one that we explicitly run is PyCon USA. And the reason this conference is so important is that it is by far the largest source of income for the Python Software Foundation. As organizers of PyCon US, we have a conference that is over 3,500 attendees from over 50 countries. This conference alone actually allows us to raise approximately 65% of the funds for the Python Software Foundation. And more importantly than those profits, not only help us take care of things like PyPI, Python packaging, help us fund developer sprints for, let's say, core Python, but then we are able to use those profits to help us run this global grants program, which is a direct value of the Python community. A direct value for all of us is to make sure we're growing that international and diverse group of Pythonistas that we know are using the language around the world. So some examples of other ways that the grants program helps us in actually executing our mission is that we're then able to fund very interesting and exciting opportunities that alone, just as the PSF, be it we're talking about the staff or the individual directors, that we alone can't run. So this is an opportunity for us to collaborate with the community to help support the community, be it if it's a grant that's helping fund a Python event like the First Ambassador Program in West Africa, or if it's conferences like Python Brazil in 2019. For anyone who wants to know about the other kinds of events that the PSF has helped fund through the grants program, all of that is public record, which, as you can see on the slide here, if you go to python.org/PSF/records, all of the board resolutions about what items were improved and for what amount are listed there in our public meeting minutes. So in discussing who is the Python Software Foundation, the Python Software Foundation includes not only the staff, that is the actual folks who are on the payroll that are led by the executive director Eva Jodlowska, but there's also a board of directors that is voted on by the members of the Python Software Foundation. When voting, and if voted in, each director then goes on to serve a 3-year term. And the board of directors, specifically what's a part of their mandate is that we help brainstorm what the Python Software Foundation should work on. We establish working groups such as the Code of Conduct Working Group. We help support and advise on the Python Software Foundation's financial strategy. And again, we're actively trying to help meet community where our community is at to understand what initiatives and what values and try to bring back that feedback to the PSF and helping execute the mission of the PSF. All directors, by the way, are not staff. So this is something that you publicly get voted into and you are volunteering your time to do this work. And something I'm very excited about is that as the board has gotten bigger and has had a longer, previously used to be 1-year terms, now we're at 3-year terms, is that not only as we adjust kind of how the board works, but we've also really seen some great efforts in diversifying the board as well. As you can see here, we've got directors that are from Africa, Australia, Europe, and North America. So we definitely have more work to do, but this has seen some great growth. So if you're interested for how you can join with the Python Software Foundation, that is a great question. There are a few different membership levels for the PSF you can join. There's basic, there's supporting members, there's managing members, and then you can be a fellow. Basically, the contributing members and the managing members will do on average about 5 hours a week per month in either the Python working groups or as a contributing member on an open source Python project. Both options do not require you to have formal verification. We trust you. It's actually up to you to, when you register on the website as either managing or contributing, to select which one works for you. As a fellow, our fellows are actually selected through our fellows work group. So if you ever have someone you want to nominate, these are folks who are given the fellowship status, given their many years and hours of volunteer initiatives and work to the PSF. You are able to nominate folks as well to that, and you can go and check out the website at python.org/PSF/membership to learn more about that. So all members of the Python Software Foundation, with the exception of basic members, have the ability to participate in voting. And this is a very important privilege because we fundamentally believe that the Python Software Foundation is not just the directors, it's not just the staff, but we fundamentally believe that all of our community members are the Python Software Foundation. So if you're looking to do more, definitely explore these membership levels. The basic is the only one that does not have a voting right. All the rest do. And given everything that the Python Software Foundation does for the community, we are always working to try to continue to find other ways to support our mission. However, given the pandemic of this year, the Python Software Foundation is facing a possibility of losing $1.2 million, which, as we've seen, that funding specifically from the loss of not running PyCon US in person, that loss actually has huge bearing on having less than funding for our grants program, having less funding than for helping out with things like any kind of legal issues that may arise from the trademark, maintaining PyPI and Python and other Python infrastructure. So we are actually running an end of year fundraiser, and we welcome any size donation. So if you find you are inclined to help support the PSF, please do check out bit.ly/PSF-Q4, where you can learn more about how the PSF is doing the work that we are continuing to do. If you would like to stay in touch with the PSF, we have a few places you can reach us, including our blog, our website, social media, and email. So when I talk about Python, I'm not just talking about the Python Software Foundation. I'm talking about how we all actively are supporting the community. And I'm also just, again, whenever I talk about Python, I find that I continuously am talking about the deep respect and dedication our community has to diversity and inclusion. One such way that we are talking about this, it has been through the initiatives that the board is trying to own in relation to electoral reform. Specifically, we opened up this past summer this discussion on discuss.python.org to talk about possible things that we can reform in relation to the PSF Board of Directors election, including the discussion of term limits for directors, geographic representation of the board, changes to our election procedures, and setting limits on the number of board members representing any one employer or holding company. Where we are currently working towards is we will have recommendations that we will be introducing in May 2021 when the next vote happens for the community, which will include not only recommendations for how we can change the election, but as well as elections for new board members whose term will be up in May 2021. And another initiative that we are working on is creating a diversity and inclusion work group. Actually, Marlene, who is a PSF director based out of Zimbabwe, has been championing this work and will have an announcement on the PSF blog shortly talking about the diversity and inclusion work group. Additionally, then we are building a new community leadership council that I will have a blog post on toward the tail end of this year and the start of early next year, where the idea and motivation of what the Community Leadership Council is will be introduced. Specifically, one of the goals for this Community Leadership Council is to have increased regional representation and participation of our community. And this is one mechanism by which we believe we can help continue to reach more folks that may not already be adequately represented. Additionally, besides the electoral reform that the PSF is considering, we are also, the Python Software Foundation also is dedicated to looking at gender diversity in our community, which explicitly is the PyLadies project. Started in 2011 in the United States of America, PyLadies now has over 100 chapters around the world. And most excitingly, a large part of this growth is not coming from places like Europe or the United States of America, but instead is coming from places such as Latin America and Africa. And again, like the discussion of trying to figure out how to lead and what does leadership look like in the Python open source community, not just from the perspective of the PSF, this has also been a discussion we've been championing in PyLadies. And from the time of this photo, which was May 2019, up through September of 2020, some of the folks here photographs, including Mariata, who's an organizer with PyLadies in Vancouver, Canada, Katia Lira, who does some work with PyCon Latin America, Tanya Allard, who's based in the UK and does work with some PyLadies communities there, Marlene as well represented here, Awisha, who's also a PyLadies organizer out of India. This group of people came together in a workshop at PyCon US in May 2019 to answer the question of what does leadership look like in PyLadies, or what does it not look like, and what do we need to do to change that? Specifically, there had not been an overarching governing body in PyLadies, and now we have the Global Council. The Global Council was just selected through the first election in September 2020. And something very, very exciting is that we are seeing a huge representation shift where we have 3 members that are from Latin America, and we have 2 members who are from Africa. We are all dedicated to being the change we want to see in technology. And I believe that some of the examples we've talked about thus far shows how this work can happen in many ways, and can happen not only in many ways, but in many places. So I encourage you to continue to think about how together we are building a better future. So I'll ask one last time. What do I talk about when I talk about Python? I talk about us. I talk about my home. I talk about how my home Chicago Python user group helped support me as I started my journey as a technologist. I talk about how the Python community's sense of duty to creating to creating more accountability and responsibility in tech is something that has been instrumentally important to the Python community. I talk about our empowerment of one another. I talk about how it is we, the people that make Python, and how we as a collective body are diverse, are unique, and all of that richness makes us a better community when we fight harder to have a more inclusive space. So talking about us at the end of the day, when I talk about Python, my job's super easy because you all are amazing and our community is second to none. So I would like to thank you all for me being able to share a little bit about what Python means to me and how we as a community are leading in talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Python community. I would love to continue this conversation with anyone who might want to be doing more work on this or who may have more ideas on this topic. It's a very large one and there's many issues and many nuances to it. So here's my contact information if you would like to talk. I again want to thank each and every one of you for your time today. It has been a true honor. Thank you.